live on Monday night. Thank you for listening in. And it's an interesting time that we're doing this because tonight is the first caucus of the Democratic Party going on in Iowa. And we'll probably comment on that a little bit later on. Not taking any political sides, just on the angst that our whole country feels about this coming election. And probably most of them are like me, wish we could just skip the next 10 months and then tune in about the middle of November when it's all over. Fortunately, we'll have the Olympics in the summertime to give us a diversion from people attacking each other like that. But you can just see the anger beginning to rise in our country. And if it even approaches the level that it was, in the last election, I mean, they were angry people. And that's what we're talking about. We're going to be talking about anger and control tonight, or the lack thereof, of course. I want to refresh the folks here just for a moment. Some of you probably have known this before because it's in other aspects of my writing, and it's in the book that Managing Your Anger that I'm talking about. But in our own minds, we plan events. I mean, we get up in the morning. We may not be strategic about it. We say, well, I'm going to go to work. I'm going to drive my car. I'm going to be there on time. And then something comes along and just blocks it. And it all depends upon how important it is to you. If it's Saturday and you got no big schedule and you don't mind driving, then you kind of coast along and deal with the traffic that way. But if something blocks your goal and you want to get to the dentist on time and you want to get to work on time and somebody overturns a trailer right in front of you and you get mad and because it's important to you. You want to get to work on time. You want to get to the dentist. You want to keep your appointments. And so it really is an interesting thing because you can't control it. And that's where we're going to keep coming back in terms of anger itself. But in the past I've talked and related to other ways, but in our own mind, we have some concept of how I'm going to have a happy, successful, fulfilled day. And then things come along and block that goal. And we kind of naturally get angry. A mother says, we're going to have dinner at 5 and she's all ready. She sweat over the stove a little bit and the kids don't show up. And, or ad infinitum on that matter. You cleaned the house, you got it ready and she walks through and tracks across the rug. And kind of the natural reaction to that is probably anger. And that's understandable. And then you have certain goals for your life or even just for the day. And you're not certain how it's going to turn out. And you just feel anxious about it. It's just a normal thing. It's the way God created us. Nothing wrong with that, of course. And but then you have some dream of, I want this promotion. I've worked all my life for this promotion. And you found out that another man got the promotion and you didn't. And you feel that your goal for working all those years at that plant was blocked. I mean, I am not going to make it. I didn't achieve what I wanted to. And people can get very, very depressed over things like that things that I wanted to happen didn't happen, and I'm disappointed. And it feels like a loss in you. It could be a loss of your reputation, a loss of your dreams, for instance, and you get depressed. Now, what we're going to say tonight, Matt, is no God-given goal for your life can be blocked, uncertain, or impossible. God-given goal, not the ones we make up ourselves. And so we want to try to explain that tonight and illustrate it in terms of politics and the way you live and being a mom and dad and trying to raise children. And which brings up a good question, by the way. We had a question from last week.
Last week, Gene asked, how do you suggest we help children who get angry so fast?
Next question.
That's right. Start with an easy one first.
Well, it is a great question. And it really has a lot to do with just simply how you raise children, for that matter. We were talking earlier about that question, actually, and I said, everybody who's been parenting knows about the terrible twos. I mean, it's just a fact of life where a little child wants to expand himself and wants to exert himself and I can do it, and you get all kind of a thing. And it's every child go through that phase in life. And I said the key during that time is to break the will, but not the spirit of the child. Because they're asking two questions at that time. Do you love me and can I get my own way? The good parent says, yes, I love you, and no, you can't get your own way. Right. I know right now you're going through it as a grandparent, aren't you?
Yeah, it's not just 2-year-olds. It continues on.
It continues on. I said, but truth of the matter is, if you just love your child and let him have his own way, I can pretty well promise you, you're going to have some very difficult teenage years with that child. Now, this problem of control is frankly an illusion. We think that we can control the future ahead of us. You know, it's a very common statement. I'm not sure where it originated from. The master of my fate, I'm the captain of my soul. And it sounds good, but it's very humanistic if you actually realize it. God never really designed the soul to function as master. We're either serving God or mammon, being deceived into think we're serving ourselves. But truth of the matter is, we really aren't. So the whole goal of life essentially is to honor God, to be led by God. When you try to make a decision about the future and you think, I can control this, but there's two factors about that you have to constantly consider. Number one, anytime you make a decision, if you're a wise person, a responsible person, you're going to try to accumulate all the facts into making that decision, but you'll never know if all the facts are in. You'll never know that. There's no way to ever know that. And there's no way that what you decide to do, what the consequences of that will be. And some of them are just totally unintentional. It could be an accident of weather or whatever else. And so this illusion of control is sad because there's nobody, and I maintain this, I've been saying it for years, nobody more insecure than a controller. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is, Matt?
I think you want to control because you don't really understand God. You may know about God, but you don't really know Him. If you don't know Him, you don't trust Him. So if I can't trust Him, then somebody's got to be in control.
Yeah. It brings up an issue that's very prevalent to us in terms of our own personal ministry. I said it really enters into the concept of being driven or called. Make it happen or let it happen.
Right.
And Matt and I have had some fun discussions about this one, but I'm really of the ilk that you really let it happen. You give God your future. What I used to explain to the young seminarians was, I said, there's a door over there, and God's will for you is on the other side of that door. And you say, well, what is it? I said, why do you want to know? So you can determine whether or not you want to go through the door?
Right.
I said, the real issue is you got to decide that on this side of the door. If God is God, He has a right to decide what's on the other side of that door for you. And the key to that is to learn to bloom where you're planted and be faithful where you're at. And don't rattle doors. God will open the door at the right time. Then you go through it boldly. But that's an important part of this discussion as well. But the fallacy of that insecure controller is that it all comes back to their belief that in order for me to be successful, for me to be happy, for me to be fulfilled, I got to get my own way.
Right.
And so in order to make that happen, I got to somehow try to manipulate the circumstances or to control other people.
They presume that they know what's good and what's best, and you don't.
No.
And I think the key to that is when we realize that God has infinite knowledge and He's the creator and I'm not. And at this point in my life, I'm in some transitional points in my life. And if you ask me, here's a piece of paper, write down what you want. I'm over that. I don't know what's best for me. I'm trusting God to lead me into whatever the next adventure is at this point. I don't want control.
My wife used to kind of get mad at me because every year we start, I said, I wonder what's going to happen this year. Mm-hmm. And I really believe that. That's far more adventuresome type of living. And that's a growth issue for all of us, because I can remember when I was an aerospace engineer, man, I had this plan, this had to happen, I'm going to graduate then, I'm going to put, and I thought I kind of had the next 5 years mapped out. But I have been so surprised by God over the years that all of a sudden I'm no longer an engineer. I'm standing up at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas and giving my heart to Christ. And next thing you know, I'm off to seminary. And I had no idea what God was going to do. I kind of thought I'm going to be a country pastor and get paid with chickens and eggs. And God had a different idea for me. I had no idea I was ever going to be a seminary prof. I mean, that came out of the blue for me. And I had no desire, zero desire to ever start my own ministry. And so, to me, it's an adventure.
He told me he never had a desire to write a book.
That's true. Actually, I never did. I didn't think I ever would. It wasn't on my agenda. And
Unbelievable.
it is. It really, honestly is. And but that makes life to me a lot more exciting and interesting than somehow or another it's fixed for me, and then I got to make things happen. And you start controlling and manipulating people. I mean, think of cases that you and I have talked with people about, and you got this angry husband, or it could be an angry wife. I mean, there's a lot of homes where wives say, you may be the head of the house, but I'm the neck that runs it. And and men that I find many times just defer. They don't like to fight a battle that they think they're going to lose, and so they just get lost in their job and their hobbies in their garage, and you want it, baby, you got it. So it is an interesting issue. But I've just seen families tore up by people who've just got to control every little detail of the day, and it can be nothing but one angry period after another.
And I've seen so many times, Neil, it's due to fear. I've got to control it because I don't trust.
Well,
and
I think that's true.
The control issue is, you may be thinking about that and say that's a complex issue because self-control is a fruit of the Spirit. We're not talking about not having self-control, but it's the control that tries to control outcomes. That's where it starts to run off the rails.
And saying that is, there's nothing wrong with making a goal or some plans for the future. I think we ought to do that. However, it's not a God.
Right.
I mean, and it's no good if you got a goal to accomplish something this year if it doesn't give you meaningful activities today.
Right.
If it's just some target out there that you threw out and said, I want to lose 20 pounds, I'll start tomorrow. So if you if it doesn't affect you today, then it's really nothing but a guilt thing that's going to come along the way later on. So. But I've seen this happen so many times where that people just get angry when they go to a meeting and things didn't turn out like they did to, and they want to start controlling the people and manipulating folks around you. And I said, that is going to cause, staff problems, ministry problems, and family problems like you can't believe. Right. So, what is the one goal in my life that cannot be blocked? And that's to become the person God created us to be. And that just seems to be off the grid for so many people. It was for me. I look back and, I went to the Navy, I'm an aerospace engineer, and, and you had construction and all that kind of thing. And, but the concept of just being that person, and then once that's established, the being before doing, the character before career, maturity before ministry, if that's your primary focus, that stuff kind of works out.
Right.
I look at our whole ministry. I've never gone where I haven't been asked. We don't advertise. And I've just seen God open up the fields. I said, the important about that is that when God leads you, you need some patience to allow God to prepare the ground before you. What is really fascinating to me? If our goal is blocked, we get angry. If it's uncertain, we get anxious, either short-term or long-term for that matter. And if it seems to us to be impossible, we get depressed. I said, now look at the fruit of the Spirit. The goal of our instruction is love. It's singular, which is kind of intriguing, isn't it? Because there's 9 things that follow. But I think the goal of our instruction is love. And the fruit of the Spirit is love. It's singular, actually. And you have this rainbow effect. But now, what we've been talking about here, if that really is your goal, God is love, is to take on the nature and the character of God, become the person God created you to be, then look at the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, instead of depression. Peace, instead of anxiety. Long-suffering, instead of anger. Long-suffering literally means patience is a long time before you get angry. It's willing to wait, essentially.
Right.
And and so the very thing that God wants to, it's like Romans chapter 5, we exult in our tribulations, knowing that tribulation brings perseverance, proven character, Proven character, hope, and hope that doesn't disappoint because the love of God has been forth into our heart. You know what those trials and tribulations do? They reveal wrong goals.
Mm-hmm.
But they actually make possible the goal, proven character, that I'm going to go through this trial and come out of it a better person than I went into it.
But with the wrong expectation, that process of those goals being exposed, we become disillusioned. Either God's mad at me, or God's bad, or I'm bad.
Or we blame ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, an angry person doesn't feel good about themselves. Don't let them con you along that guy. Nobody likes living that way.
Right.
I mean, I'm just, red beat in the face all the time, trying to control all my kids around me and manipulate my staff at church or wherever else,
Miserable.
It's miserable. It's a miserable way to live. And, when you look back over your life in terms of your own journey along that route, how much of that, when you look back, did you say, boy, I planned that and it went just a T, or you're kind of surprised by the
Not hardly anything went according to how you plan it. And that's why I think over time, you just like, I don't want to make the plans. And in Victory Over the Darkness, you talked about the difference in a goal and a desire. And boy, when I heard that, I'm like, so many of my desires that I didn't have the right or ability to control, I had made a goal.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed constantly.
Well, I mean, and it continues on through life. I mean, to me, that was, in my own understanding, writing that was a very liberating thing. Obviously I lived it before I wrote it, but it's, and it goes on.
Right.
There was a time when I thought, God, this is the key to life, man, knowing who you are, that God, He's my Heavenly Father, and have this relationship, and I'm just going to become the person God created me to be. And so I kind of adopted a goal. Every church could know this. I mean, I was setting myself up.
Sure.
And I couldn't understand why. Why wouldn't you want to know who you are? Why wouldn't every pastor want his people to know who they are? And we got a process of repentance, and that works. And I said, and I just had to sit back and say, sit down, Neil, settle down. Mm-hmm. You have just made a desire a goal. My desire, honestly, is that every church, would fall in love with God, fall in love with each other. I said, but I can't control that. And I've got a peace about it now. But I can remember, early on in ministry, especially when people were attacking me, I said, what are you doing? What, and they had no valid reason, and they would never come to me, of course. They just would snicker off to the side. Now think about that.
I know.
What's behind that? I got to control this guy.
Mm-hmm.
He may set everybody free. Wouldn't that be horrible?
Well, he's getting attention that I want or something.
I don't know. Jealousy enters into it. We're complex. I got to admit that. But here's the other thing, because we are in election year this year, and you just watch the angry people. Oh my goodness. And they I can see why. They feel powerless. Mm-hmm. I see Congress in chaos. And so we try to manipulate the agenda. Please don't take this as a political issue, but right now we're at the time when they're going to vote as to whether or not our president is impeached. And but they rushed it through the House of Representatives, and everybody would look back and say, you didn't take your time, you didn't do it right. You were trying to orchestrate the outcome without going through the process fairly, and frankly, they're going to lose. And neither side is helped by that, and our country isn't helped by it. And so I said, well, I can do something about it. I can get involved in grassroots politics. I can, run for local elections. I can be part of the political group that I feel, best represents me, and I can go up the chain and get into Congress, whatever. Well, that takes too long. So what do, man?
Protest in the street.
They go out and protest in the street. And, and I can only see this, to be honest with you, getting worse, because we have a whole culture now of instant gratification. Yeah. I want change that conforms to me, and I want it now. Mm-hmm. and aren't willing to have the patience. There's no sense of long suffering. Do you see this getting worse?
I actually have talked to pastors that talked about the process of discipleship just took too long. I'm like, yeah, it takes a lifetime, but that's what we're called to. We're not called to make converts, we're called to make disciples.
I think that some of the teaching that Christ is eminently coming has really kind of fostered that. So we want to jump to the big scale again. But I said, if years ago, I heard the application, if you just take 1 penny and double it every day, and you got 2, and you got 4, you got a penny. Start with a penny. Mm-hmm. 30 days later, you got $5 million.
Yeah.
You go,
that's right.
So if you just would sit down and develop 2 friends and for 6 months and just work with them and counsel them, and they each did 2 others, do you realize you would have after 5-10 years? Why don't we do this? That's the model Christ gave us.
That's the Jesus model.
That is the model.
Start with 12 and
convert
the world.
He would talk to the masses, but more times than not, he drove them off. He of the 12, he had the 3, and then there were 70. But we keep saying, no, we don't have enough time to do that. I said, why do we always, never have enough time to do it right, but then we always have enough time to do it over again?
We didn't plan to do it over again, though. That's the problem.
No, I know, but we find ourselves doing it, right?
So, I think that golden desire that you're talking about, Neil, is, I just remember people's faces when I explained it to them. Like, a godly goal is something that I have the right and the ability to change.
Yeah.
Anything outside of that is a desire. And can't you see that you're trying to control your wife or your husband or your daughter or your son or your event at work, and it's causing this anger?
Well, here's the illusion. See, you can, a parent does have the ability to control his kids with anger. And it can last for a little time. But it's not good parenting. And you don't realize the damage that's probably doing to the child. Yeah. That he's just, the whole orientation that you have towards him is fear. Mm-hmm. And so he doesn't want to be around. And as soon as you're gone, when the cat's away, the mice will play. So you haven't really developed something inwardly in the child. He's just responding in fear.
Well, just the question that we just asked, that was a difficult question. How do you stop a child from getting angry so quickly? Well, don't focus on the anger. Just stop and ask the child, why are you mad? Yeah. Ask them to tell you the story. They'll tell you what they're mad about. Yeah. You think of a 3 or 4-year-old or 5-year-old that's getting in trouble, and you just snatch them up and get them out of there because they didn't mind you. They don't want their control, that you just took them. Explain it to them. Stop and be patient with them.
Not only that, but I'm a real fan of just allowing natural consequences to just let him have his little temper tantrum. Mm-hmm. And don't feed it, and don't foster it, and don't try to placate it, and just simply say, just look at the little kid and say, too bad, but you're not getting it right now. Mm-hmm. You can have your temper tantrum, but it ain't going to work.
That's right. And I love you.
But if you let it work, Mom and Dad, the one who's being trained is you.
And they're looking for the boundaries. They're looking for the limits because that communicates love to them. Mm-hmm. I tell my grandchildren, if I didn't love you, I wouldn't try to correct you. I wouldn't care what you do.
I had a remarkable experience when I was a dorm master and wrestling coach at a private school. And we had this kid, obviously had never learned no. I mean, he came from a rich family. It's a private school. It's a boarding school. And sadly, I would say a third to half of them are there because Mom and Dad, frankly, just don't care to have them around. Right. So here, you raise my kid kind of a thing. And this guy was 15 years old and a good athlete, very talented young man. And every night, at the dorm, we had a little rule, you got to sweep out and they took turns doing it kind of a thing. And every night I had to sit on this kid. His name is Kerry. And it helped to be the wrestling coach with him. And he actually tried out for the team, and because I was the coach, he got a little bit better in regards to that. But I just always was riding this guy. I mean, I didn't like that. But no, Kerry, you're not going to have your way. He's 15 years old. He has had, I think, for most of his life. And then he went home for Christmas, and he had gotten better, by the way, and partly because he was on the team. And he came back worse than ever. And I literally just kind of grabbed him and, playfully, because I'm the coach kind of a thing, and took him in my room, and I said, Kerry, what in the world's going on? You were doing pretty good before. And uncharacteristic of him, he kind of broke down actually and said, well, I went home and my stepmother didn't want me in the house, and so I basically stayed in the hotel. And I said, for crying out loud. You know, I'm so sorry. I said, but truth of the matter is, I said, as bad as that is, I can't let you rule things. So, and unfortunately, I never got angry at him, mad at him, but I was firm. And then 2 weeks later, the dean called me in and said, we're transferring Carrie to another dorm. And he said, you're too hard on him. And I said, well, I don't think I was. But and I was honest with him too. I said, I know why he's changing. He's going into a dorm with the dorm master will not control him, not have any control over it. And he fell apart. And actually about March of that year, they sent him home actually. And the dean called me in and he said, well, we sent Carrie home. He said, I asked him, were you ever happy here? He said, yeah, well, it's Mr. Anderson's dorm. And I've never forgotten that. Essentially what he was saying is, sit on me. You know, do something. Show me you love me.
Show me you love me.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And without hitting me, kind of a thing, or getting mad yourself, but just to learn to be firm. And so kids are asking 2 questions. Do you love me? And can I have my own way? And the answer is yes, I love you. No, you can't. and be steadfast and consistent with that if you possibly can. You'll get a lot better result if you do that. So this I can't tell you how important this is. Rage right now is the #1 emotion on the internet. Actually, a study was done out of China, of all things, and that actually identified that, and is transferred onto 2 or 3 generations. People pick up somebody else's anger, and they spread that anger, and now kids are picking up their phones and they're seeing something that makes them mad, and so the media is exasperating the anger. We've always had anger problems. I mean, ever since the fall. But it really, to me, I think it is pandemic right now. We got a whole world that's ready to explode. And you say, well, we got to tell the world. I said, see, there's the same problem. One person at a time. I said, get the book. Have a Bible study. Have some friends over. Talk about it, because everybody's dealing with this. Unless you feel in your own life. I said, I've known this for a long time, and I can honestly tell you, and I like Matt being here with me, because we're not angry people. I'm not angry. I've got a part to play in this world, and that's all God is asking me to do. Let me share a story. After a conference I did where I brought this out, I said, your conference has had a profound impact on my life. I was a suit salesman. No, I was an angry suit salesman. I would get so mad if a customer walked away without buying a suit when I was sure he was going to make a purchase. We had these sales meetings where we were challenged to set goals for the number of suits we wanted to sell that week. Prizes were offered if we met or beat our goals. I wanted to be the salesperson of the year and win a trip to Hawaii. To make matters worse, my boss is a Jew, and I've been a horrible witness to him. He'd have to pull me aside a number of times when I got angry and tell me to settle down. I realized this week I had the wrong goal. My goal is not to sell a certain number of suits. My goal is to be the suit salesman that God has called me to be. Rather than trying to manipulate and persuade a customer to buy a suit, I began to think of what the customer really needed. I actually talked the customer out of buying a suit that I knew he wouldn't be satisfied with. This simple truth had such a profound impact on my countenance that my boss pulled me aside last week and asked, are you all right? This newfound freedom, I feel, must have had some effect on my customers, because I sold more suits last week than I ever had before. I love that story. I said it's so true, because there's so many men out here who are governed by that. To hit the success model, get this house, get this job, and they're willing to climb over somebody else's back to get that.
Absolutely.
And I said, that is such a violation of do nothing from selfish and empty conceit, but with humility, mind, each of you regard one another as more important than yourself. Have this attitude which is also in Christ Jesus. That's a character issue again. And if we look back at that, I said, when I realized, when I was an aerospace engineer, that I was really working for God at Honeywell, that changed my perspective. I started a Bible study. I saw some people come to Christ. And out of that, God called me into ministry. And I'm so thankful looking back that I realized that at that time, because it was, it's hard for people today. When you see other people out there, they're not tithing, so they got 10% more money than you do.
Right.
And they don't care that much about their family, so they don't mind working overtime or weekends or whatever else, and ignoring their family. And you say, so the pagan has the advantage here. Don't buy that for a second, folks. They don't. It'll show up down the pathways. And when all of a sudden they're married 2-3 times, the kids are rebelling, life is miserable.
You said a key thing about considering others more important than yourself. And we talked about a little bit last week about road rage. Part of the problem with road rage, if you really think about it, is like, I'm sitting in this line and I've been sitting here for 5 minutes to do something, and then you pull around me and you want to pull in. I'm like, no way are you pulling in. What's at the heart of that? It's not just a control thing. It's like, you're disrespecting me that I've been sitting here. It's like you don't see me. It's all about you, and I'm insignificant. Well, we lost that in the fall. Significance.
Have you ever thought about the fact that when cars are lined up like that and we're jumping in front of somebody and getting ahead, do you do that when you're not in a car? You're standing at 2 lines and all of a sudden you see a gap. A guy doesn't step forward right away. Have you ever jumped in front of him?
Only going into a tennis tournament.
I was in the Philippines, and it was after the Olympics, and it would take us 2 hours to drive across town. It was just terrible. I've never seen traffic like that in my life. And we were scoring near finishes. We were going, oh man, that was a 9.8, And then I said, and after a week, the missionary who was driving us around, he said, you made a lot of fun of our traffic here. He said, how many accidents have you seen? I said, that's a good question. Actually, none. We didn't see any. Why do you think that is? He said, well, this is a very relational culture. When it comes to an impasse like that, they look at each other. See, we don't. Mm-hmm. We look straight ahead. If I look at you, I made it personal. And so, when I spent a year up in Boston, and I actually had this confirmed around, they go, what are the worst drivers you've ever seen? I said, up in New England. And I said, why do you think that is? I think that is probably one of the most individualistic cultures in our country. And they estimate that half of the crashes that we have could be avoided if you would just be willing to defer. Mm-hmm. But you ain't taking my spot.
Do that in traffic and defer to somebody and wave at them and smile. It's so much more pleasant to go to the mall when you're nice to people.
And be careful how you wave.
Yeah.
It should be all 4 fingers.
Yeah, that's right. No one finger wave.
I remember one time it was really foggy. I mean, you could hardly see anything. And I was driving, and I turned into a street, and I didn't see the guy. I mean, I almost hit him, though. And man, he jumped back, and I rolled down the window. And I think he thought I was going to yell at him or something like that. And so I could just see, his anger rising up like that. And I said, I am so sorry. Would you please forgive me? I didn't see you there. He goes, yeah. It was really cool. I mean, because I knew it was my fault. I didn't see him. I mean, so, somebody has to assume responsibility for it. But, soft answer, puts off wrath. And I think that is something we all have to learn, is don't be defensive, just own up to it and move on. And be polite about it.
I did that last week in traffic in one of the busiest areas here, and I pulled out in front of somebody, and they honked, and I'm sure they were angry. They pulled up next to me at the stoplight. I rolled down my window and said, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. And they smiled.
Yeah.
And had I said something else, it would not have been a smile. That would have been returned. It's so much more pleasant than just trying to be angry all the time. That's a miserable existence.
Well, the fruit of the Spirit is not spouse control, staff control, child control even for that matter. It is self-control. And if self is under control, and if you think that's easy, by the way, just go on a diet, or fast for a week, or get over your addiction problem, or those kind of issues in life. It is a miracle of God that as a child of God, my body is a temple of God, that I have the mind of Christ. The Holy Spirit will lead me into all truth. And if you will just regularly allow Him to fill Him with your Holy Spirit, you're going to find self-control. And just think through your life for a moment. Is that a desire or a goal? Is that a God-given goal for me? To jump over that person's shoulders so I can get an advancement. Is that God's goal for me? And put a desire where it belongs. A desire is disappointing when they don't happen. There's a lot of disappointments in life, people.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of things don't go my way. Elections don't go my way. And so disappointments are part of life. Let me just close tonight with this. Disappointment, His appointment. Change one letter, then I see that the thwarting of my purpose is God's better choice for me. His appointment must be blessing, though it may come in disguise, for the end from the beginning, open to His wisdom lies. Disappointment, His appointment. No good thing will He withhold. From denials oft we gather, treasures of His love unfold. Well He knows each broken purpose leads to fuller, deeper trust, and the end of all His dealings proves our God is wise and just. Disappointment, His appointment. Lord, I take it then as such, like clay in hands of a potter, yielding wholly to your touch. My life's plan is thy molding. No one single choice be mine. Let me answer on repining. Father, not my will, but thine.
Wow. It's good.
Hey, thanks for listening. We're going to pick this up again. We're not done with anger. We're going to look at flesh patterns next week, things that we've developed over time that have made it, possible for us to get our way sometimes. And then we look at it and say, that's not the way God wants me to live, and the outcome won't be good as well. So, hey, remember, come over to the Cove April 1st. Maybe the last time that I share there. I'm so thrilled that they always invite me to do that. But we're going to talk about resolving conflicts and finding peace. And so that's April 1st, 2nd, and 3rd at Asheville, North Carolina. Well, God bless you. Thanks for listening.
Thanks. Good night.
Thank you for your prayerful support of Freedom in Christ Ministries. All of our content is made possible by you. Your generous support and financial gifts make these videos and our ministry possible. For more information on how to support our ministry, please visit www.freedominchrist.org and click Get Involved.